Well, hello and welcome to my communications clinic for early June. And I'm recording this because lots of people are on half term this week and can't make it, but have said, "Oh, can I have a copy?" So here's a copy for you with the tips that I was going to share, especially my clip of the month. And the theme this year is opening an event. And you see, I'm opening this one with a slide that's, I hope, interesting. It's engaging. It's got something on it that's making you curious, I think. And if you note here, it's actually personalized to the date. And I think that's quite relevant to make people think, yeah, this is contemporary, it's bang up to date. And I always like to start with something with a bit of impact. So I'm going to start with a TV clip that illustrates where I'm coming from in this and gives a tiny bit of my story.
Welcome to Southeast Today. I'm Ellie Crisell.
And I'm John Young. Tonight's top stories. So there we go. That's a way of opening an event with a bit of a surprise, perhaps, for people. So if you've got a town hall event, a sales event, a meeting of some sort that could potentially be quite hard work, heavy lifting, start it with something that'll grab people's attention. It needn't be as complicated as a video, although I'll explain in a moment why video needn't be that complicated. It could be a strong image. It could be a story with an image attached, but something to engage people immediately and make them curious and want to stick around. So that's the day job I've done for 20 plus years, working in TV news. Then, having told a bit of a story, grab the attention, I then want to say a tiny bit more about myself to gain credibility for the event that is to come if you're hosting an event. But my suggestion is don't do it very first thing, because that can be a bit boring. Grab people's attention first and then explain why what you've got might be relevant. So in this case, I've worked in the BBC, lots of different places around my career. Started off with hair, but only left very recently. So again, if you're in a sales situation or you're trying to win people round at the beginning of an event, a light touch introduction to you, I think, is more fun than a long CV in a sort of boastful sort of a way. What do? You might want to explain if you're starting a training session or something. Why might it be relevant? Well, in my case, I'm a BBC journalist. Haven't worked in internal or external comms, but have worked in newsrooms, which is all about communications. So there's me in a news studio, there's me communicating as a news reporter with a cameraman, there's me communicating through my communications workshops that I run face-to-face in companies. There's some places I've worked in. So a bit of a sort of sales pitchy thing there, but it's not the very first thing. It's down a little bit and it's subtle. And I've also trained journalists at the BBC, at the College of Journalism. So you start with some impact, then you say a little bit about yourself, and then you move on to the broad content. Now, in this communications clinic, if there were loads of people here with me now, but this is a recorded version without other people, I'd want a bit of a chat. I would want to put it out to the people on the virtual meeting to find out what they wanted. And if they were shy, they could put it in the chat box. Ideally, though, they'd have their cameras on and they would be talking to me, and I'd be saying, "What do you want to get out of this? What's in it for you to be here? What do you want?" So in the live version, I'll be asking questions about that before, and I'd probably stop sharing the screen at that point so we could have a proper chat. And then I would move on to, I move on in my session to my, what I call clip of the month, which is when I want to play something that illustrates the theme of this event. So the theme of this communications clinic is openings with impact for your event. You might have a theme which is staff numbers or budget figures or something else. But I want to bring it in at this point and try and do it in an engaging way. So I have what I call the clip of the month. And here's how I introduce my clip of the month. So, a bit of fun, a bit of energy, because maybe 5 minutes into an event, you want to keep the energy levels up, because if it's a virtual event, people might be tuning out. They might be going off and doing their emails. So I found an engaging way, you could call it a cheesy way, of keeping people's attention. But I'm a believer that cheesiness isn't necessarily a bad thing. And here is my clip of the month, and it looks at opening. So I'm now going to show you the opening of a news bulletin. I hope the next 2 or 3 minutes you'll really take something away from watching this summarized version of my communications clinic. I'm going to play you the opening of a news bulletin, one that I happened to present when I was a news presenter a couple of years ago. But I want you to think about what's going on here, what's going on behind the scenes, what's the structure of this opening 60 seconds of a news bulletin. Here's the news bulletin, have a think, and then I'm going to play it again with some suggestions. Here we go.
Welcome to South East Today. I'm Ellie
And
Crisell.
I'm John Young. Tonight's top stories. The lorry driver who was watching a video while driving on the M25 sentenced to 9 years for killing a young woman.
Turned his lorry into what effectively was a lethal weapon, 40 tonnes of metal being driven by somebody that was watching their phone.
One person is in hospital tonight after part of a ride broke away, hitting a spectator at Brighton Pier. An investigation is underway.
Also in tonight's programme, parents struggling with the high cost of formula milk are putting their babies' lives at risk by watering it down, say midwives. The owner of a Gatwick meet and greet parking company is found guilty of misleading trading after dumping cars unsecured in muddy fields. And hitting a high street near you, the Kent graphic designers, whose fashion and accessories range is popping up in Primarks worldwide.
Good evening. A lorry driver who was watching a Romanian comedy video on his phone when he smashed into a stationary car, killing the young driver, has been given a 9-year sentence. So there is the opening of a news bulletin. It follows a real formula, doesn't it? So now I want to break down that formula and hope, and this is my approach. Other communications people might say this couldn't work, but I'm a believer as a broadcaster that it could work in your company, looking at the formula of what was actually happening there. I'm going to play it again and pull up some words that will indicate what I think are the takeaways you could take away from this meeting and consider bringing into meetings and events that you may hold, whether for staff, stakeholders, customers, clients. Here we go. So we start with a bit of music and a bit of energy, but beyond that there are other things. Here they come.
Welcome to South East Today. I'm Ellie Crisell.
And I'm John Young. Tonight's top stories. The lorry driver who was watching a video while driving on... Pictures. How often do you start with pictures at a virtual, or even doesn't have to be virtual anymore, does it? It could be in some training room. Do you just stand there and talk, or do you have slides, but not just slides with words? How often do you have pictures that are in your face? And part of the training as a news journalist in a television newsroom is not just any old pictures, but the best pictures, the strongest pictures. I had an editor who would drum it home. We'd have our program, we'd have our meeting after the program, and sometimes he'd be not happy. He'd be saying, why did we use those pictures in the headlines? They weren't the best pictures. Getting the strongest pictures, really important to grab people's attention. Okay, picture's the first thing. The M25 sentenced to 9 years for killing a young woman. And there's a picture of the victim here. It pulls at that emotion, but I don't think in an inappropriate way. It makes it relevant. Do you put pictures at the beginning of your meetings that are relevant and can make an emotional connection to the people attending that meeting? Okay, what do we have other than pictures? Here we go.
His lorry into what effectively was a lethal weapon, 40 tonnes of metal.
We have a soundbite. Now you may think this is all very telly news. I'm just holding a meeting about our latest budget figures, but actually in this day and age, could you get a soundbite from someone that is relevant? Could be the CEO, could be a member of staff, could be, have a think about who it could be, but actually get a soundbite and put it into your slides. It's not as complicated as you might think. And if you are from a company that's quite large and maybe has a team of people working in the sort of comms department, I bet some of the young guns there, look, I'm in my mid-50s, but I've taught myself to do all this stuff because I worked in newsrooms, but I bet there are some young guns there who are all over TikTok and would love to be told, can you get a video clip into our next presentation, please? Have a think about whether that might really make people sit up. Okay, pictures, soundbites, what else?
Being driven by somebody that was watching their phone.
One person is in hospital tonight after part of a ride broke away, hitting a spectator at Brighton Pier. An investigation is underway.
Also in tonight's programme...
That last one, breaking news from Brighton Pier, that was brand new. That had just happened. We got those pictures about 20 minutes before we went to air. How agile can you be with your meetings? Could you have a meeting at 10 a.m. and include in the opening something that happened that morning? And if you did, what impression would that give your team, your staff, if this were a staff meeting? I suspect it would be a good one because they'd think, wow, they're on it. They're in tune with this company. This isn't something they prepared last week. Have a think about that. I rolled on with my slide there to the next thing, this story about formula baby milk. So the fourth thing we've done in the headlines, after pictures, sound bites, and being very agile with breaking news, is brought in things that matter to people using strong images. A story about baby milk, that's very relevant. What are the stories in your communications that you're telling that are really quite boring and don't matter to a lot of your staff? And where are the ones that really, really do? Maybe have a think about that.
Parents struggling with the high cost of formula milk are putting their babies' lives at risk by watering it down, say midwives. The owner of a Gatwick meet and greet parking company is found guilty of misleading trading after dumping cars unsecured in muddy fields.
Things that matter, more strong images there. I'm one step ahead with my own slides here. More strong images there of the cars, a story that matters to people. And finally, the story, something upbeat to end on. It's just coming up.
And hitting a high street near you, the Kent graphic designers, whose fashion and accessories range is popping up in Primarks worldwide.
Good evening. A lorry driver who was watching a Romanian comedy video on his phone when he smashed into a stationary car, killing the young driver, has been given a 9-year sentence. So there, in a nutshell, is the opening of a TV news bulletin, a formula that you will see whether you watch ITV, Sky, BBC, you name it. Strong pictures, sound bites to make people curious and make people interested. Breaking news, things that are agile, things that have happened just beforehand that show that you're on the case, if you like. Things that matter to you, that story about the car park, for example, or the baby milk, and something upbeat though at the end there, a nice upbeat story about those young women and their art project. Something cheerful. That is a formula that I think could work if you are opening an event and will keep people sticking around. There are all sorts of other things you can do, and I address them in other communications clinics and workshops. But I hope that's given you pause for thought. And as I say, if you think, oh, well, that's way too complicated, I just wonder if some of the maybe younger, more techie members of your team might find it a hugely exciting challenge to introduce some of those things to your meetings. Now, at this point in my live communications clinic, I go full screen because you don't want to appear at that slide for ages. I want to see people's faces in a virtual event. I go full screen and we have a good old chat about that. We discuss it, we debate it, we hear other questions answered. And then at the end of the event, and this is particularly relevant if you're in sales, and let's face it, I'm doing this for free because I want to give something back, but I also want to let you know what I can do for a fee as part of my business. I run workshops that will look into this in great detail. How to make your webinar so good no one wants to click leave is one of them. That's something I can do for teams of 5, 10, 15, 20, you name it, either virtually or face-to-face. And you can send me material, things you're already doing. I'll look at it, I'll break it down, we'll go through it together, and I'll come up with some other solutions. That's one of my popular workshops. How to make boring things interesting for your staff, clients, stakeholders and customers. Look at my, whoops, there it is, one of my slogans. I particularly help companies who work in complicated areas, law, insurance, finance, accountancy, because that can be dull, and I help them find the stories that make things interesting and insert those stories into some of their presentations, whether it's to their staff or their clients or to explain complicated things. And something I've recently moved into, media training. It's a lot of people think I'm a media trainer, but actually while I was at the BBC I couldn't do that because there would have been a conflict of interest. But now that I've left the BBC, I now do media training, and I particularly focus on helping companies who want to put people out there in front of the media who may be a bit nervous, a bit cautious, maybe not the most senior person in the company, but who want to promote something but are just a bit unsure how TV news works. What's the process like? I'll reassure them, I give them an experience of it, and I hope give them confidence to sell their company or their story in that way. So I hope that was useful. Listen, that was, I don't know, a 10-minute run through what would have happened if you'd been able to make my communications clinic. If you like that and you haven't signed up before, do send me your details. I'll put you on the list. Otherwise, I hope to see you again and I'll be in touch. And if at any point you just want some free advice, just pick up the phone. I'm quite old school. Just pick up the phone. My numbers are down there and say, John, I've got this thing coming up. What do you think? It'd be a great way to develop a relationship and keep in touch. Let me know how it goes. But I hope that was very useful.